answers, perhaps in a condensed manner, if depending on the time that we have left for that. Without further ado, it is a pleasure for me to introduce Ambassador Luis Gallegos Chiriboga, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ecuador. He has been part of the Foreign Service since 1966. He has studied law, diplomacy, security and development. He was an expert member of the UN Committee Against Torture. As part of his diplomatic career, he has been ambassador to the US, permanent representative of Ecuador to the UN in Geneva and in New York, and several other designations. He was vice president of the Human Rights Commission, vice president of the General Assembly of the State Parties of WIPO, vice president of the G77 and China, vice president of the 57 UN General Assembly. With that, I will stop because he has a long CV that I'm sure you all are aware, and without further ado, I have the honor to give you the floor, Your Excellency, Ambassador Luis Gallegos, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Please, you have the floor.
Muchísimas gracias, Walter. Thank you very much, Walter. It is a pleasure and an honor to be accompanied in this side event by such a distinguished group of panelists and audience. In a statement commemorating International Earth Day on the 20th of April this year, the UN Secretary General Antonio Gutierrez stressed, while all eyes are on COVID-19 pandemic, there was another life-threatening emergency, the planet's unfolding environmental crisis. He emphasized that biodiversity is in steep decline. Climate disruption was approaching a point of no return, and the pandemic was an unprecedented wake-up call that the recovery must be viewed as a real opportunity to do things right for the future. In this context, the ongoing pandemic and the environmental crisis, the summit that will take place tomorrow provides us with a unique opportunity to better understand the intrinsic link and dependence of our societies on biodiversity, as well as an urgent need for a global effort to adopt ambitious and transformative actions to protect our planet and invest in the health of our ecosystems as an investment in our future, those of our children and our families. Among these systems, oceans are the world's largest one, and perhaps the best example of this relationship, since they drive other systems and elements that make the Earth habitable to mankind, such as water cycles, weather, climate, coastlines, food provisions, and even the oxygen we breathe in the air. They cover 71% of the surface of our planet, contain about 97% of its water, and absorb about 25% of carbon dioxide produced by humans, buffering the impact of global warming while absorbing more than 90% of the excess heat in the climate system. The ocean is also home to a rich diversity of nearly 1 million known species and a vast potential of scientific discovery, including animals, plants, seaweeds, and microbes that contribute direct or indirectly to our well-being. Over 3 billion people depend on maritime and coastal biodiversity, while marine fisheries provide direct or indirect employment for over 200 million persons and the primary source of protein for over 50% of the population of least developed countries. It also represents a highway for more than 80% of goods trading, and all which gives an estimate value for marine and coastal resources and industries up to 5% of total GDP. Nonetheless, our oceans and their resources are currently facing grave threats resulting from overexploitation, overfishing, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, pollution from land and sea-based sources, sedimentation, climate change, ocean acidification, and habitat destruction, which are adversely affecting the functioning of the ecosystem. Today's science and data demonstrate that more than 33% of the fish stocks are fished at unsustainable levels, and around 80% of maritime and coastal pollution originates on land, including agriculture runoff, pesticides, plastic, untreated sewage. Among the different types of marine debris, an estimated 8 million tons of plastic enter the ocean, representing around $13 billion per year, including cleanup costs and financial losses in fisheries and other industries. With respect to fisheries, according to the World Agricultural Organization, the global growth in fish consumption has been twice as high as population growth, demonstrating therefore that the fisheries sector is crucial in meeting the goal of a world without hunger and malnutrition. However, also according to FAO reports, the fraction of the fish stocks that are within biological sustainable levels have exhibited a decreasing trend from 90% in 1974 to 66% in 2015, and it is a contrast, and the percentage of stocks fished at biologically unsustainable levels increased from 10 to 33% in the same period. Finally, there are other threats and challenges where progress has also been uneven among different states and sea areas, including, for example, the regard to effective action against perpetrators of illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. The use of catch documentation schemes and international fishing vessel records and adoption of implementation of the FAO agreement on port state measures and the use of fisheries practices in high seas that are not in compliance with the obligation in UNCLOS and in other international instruments applicable to conservation and management of stranding fish stocks and highly migratory fishing stocks occurring within the exclusive economic zone and in areas beyond and adjacent to it. Among the different responses to some of these threats and challenges, marine protected areas have been relatively successful in the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity and specific ecosystem, including by safeguarding critical marine habitats, species, and generic diversity, providing refuge for endangered species, securing areas of reproduction, sprawling, and growth of different species. The effective management of these areas in a medium and long term have resulted in an increase of fish catches in surrounding fishing areas, together with other benefits such as protection and increase of jobs and income, and enhancement of resilience against the adverse effects of climate change, and the safeguard of small businesses and local cultures that are intrinsically linked to the marine environment. It is for that reason that a group of countries and other relevant stakeholders have increasingly focused on enhancing the representativity and effectiveness of sustainable management of marine protected areas and other area-based management tools, while others are considering establishing new protected areas or expanding the existing ones and promoting the adoption of regulation and measures by the regional fisheries management organizations or by other organizations at the international and regional level. We need these organizations to work with us, with governments, with the fishing industries, and with the NGOs in order to have organizations that the management of fishing organizations is fundamental to the safeguarding of those stocks and the future development of fisheries. Some of these ongoing efforts and initiatives are considered to contribute not only to the achievement of current global agreement target SDG 14+5 and the ACHI biodiversity target 11, but also to provide the necessary confidence to adopt a commitment for a new target for the protection of oceans, which will bring many other benefits for global biodiversity. Ecuador is one of the 20 mega diverse countries in the world, and together hold two-thirds of the global biodiversity. Therefore, it prioritizes the harmonic relations with nature based on sustainable development that is environmentally balanced between the satisfaction and guarantee of the needs of the present and future generations, and the respect and conservation of nature and biodiversity, including the preservation, regeneration cycles, and structure and function. Besides other important components of this rich biodiversity of Ecuador, the Galapagos Islands and the marine reserve are particular mega diversity thanks to its privileged geographical location and the confluence of 7 ocean currents that create a high diversity of environmental and weather conditions, high levels of endemic species, and high fisheries productivity. All these conditions have generated one of the most unique oceanographic and coastal marine ecosystems on the planet that is considered a living lab of universal value that needs to be deeply studied and specially protected. The Galapagos Marine Reserve was an example of global leadership and ambition, as it was at the time the second largest marine reserve in the world, and since then it has been complemented with a series of legal and policy frameworks and international declarations, including, for example, the recognition of the World Natural Heritage by UNESCO, or as a particularly sensitive sea area by the IMO, among others. I am sure that with my fellow Minister Norman Rai can elaborate more on the specific administrations of the life sanctuary, and therefore I would only stress the sustainable management of the Galapagos Marine Reserve also form an integral part of the full commitment of Ecuador with multilateral environmental agreements and other international regional instruments, including CBD, CMS, CITES, UNFCCC, and the Paris Agreement, and the New York Agreement of 1995. The FAO Agreement of Port-State Measures and the decision and measures adopted by the Permanent Commission of the South Pacific, the Inter-American Tropical Tuna Commission, and the South Pacific Regional Fisheries Management Organization, in which Ecuador's tuna industry is highly respected. In this regard, it is important to mention that the fisheries sector of Ecuador not only provides employment for more than 200,000 persons and generates more than 1.6 millions of exports, but also promotes and complies with conservation measures under the relevant organization. Additionally, Ecuador is particularly active in the negotiations of a legally binding instrument for the conservation and sustainable use of maritime biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction, with a view to find a common ground to achieve an ambitious, balanced, and effective instrument under UNCLOS that complements existing net frameworks and provides full legal certainty to the activities in these fields. Finally, the commitment of Ecuador with the conservation and sustainable use of oceans and its biodiversity, and with the achievements of the SDG target 14.5 and the CBD ACHI target 11, have been demonstrated in the fact that 12% of our coastal and maritime areas that are of particular importance for biodiversity economic services are effectively conserved and effectively managed. Such commitment has been recently reaffirmed and complemented with the joining of Ecuador of the Global Ocean Alliance, which includes the objective of at least 30% of the oceans of the world are under protection by 2030, hoping that such target can become part of the post-2020 biodiversity framework still under negotiation. We have a long road to go. Ecuador has been an example of this biodiversity, both in its environmental and in its fishery industries. We wish you the best discussion today, and we are very grateful that you have accepted our invitation to debate this most important issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure now to give the floor to Ms. Inger Andersen, Undersecretary General and Executive Director of UNEP. It's a pleasure to have you here, and thank you particularly for your effort for connecting from Nairobi at this time of the day over there. Mr. Undersecretary Andersen was appointed as Executive Director of UNEP in February 2019. Between 2019 and 2015 and 2019, she was Director General of the IUCN, where I had the pleasure, by the way, to meet her in England. She brings more than 30 years of experience in international development economics, environmental sustainability, and policy making. And she has played a key role in supporting preparing countries on international water management and hydro diplomacy. Prior to joining IUCN, Ms. Andersen held very leadership roles at the World Bank and the UN. And most recently, she was Vice President of the Middle East and North Africa at the World Bank. And previous to that, she was Vice President for Sustainable Development and head of the CGER Fund Council. She has also a number of years of experience in the UN as well. I understand that Ms. Andersen will not be able to stay with us until the very end of the event, but it is a real honor and pleasure to have you here. Please, Ms. Andersen, the floor is yours.
You're very kind, and the honor is mine. When I got this invitation, there was nothing that was going to stop me, only the internet connection. So far it's going. First of all, Mr. Minister, Luis Gallegos Quiriboga, it's a real pleasure to hear you And to have a foreign minister in the presence of the minister for and the president of Council of Government for the Special Regiment of Galapagos speak with such powerful words on the imperative of marine biodiversity. So thank you to you, and through you to the government and people of Ecuador for what they are doing. Because, as you rightly said, we are in a situation now where we have altered the earth. The IPBES, which is a twin to IPCC, the scientific panel that looks at biodiversity, concludes that we have altered 75% of the terrestrial surface and 66% of marine ecosystems. We're overfishing, we're bycatching, we're seeing sharks and rays in very heavy decline, and some 80% of global fish stocks are seriously overfished beyond the maximum sustainable limit. And climate change, including El Niño and the impacts of coral reefs, are seen before our very eyes, with bleaching events also reported in the Latin American region, both in Colombia and Panama recently. But we know that approximately 80% of marine pollution originates from the land, from what we do, our activities. Nutrients, heavy metals, persistent organic pollutants, marine litter, all of this washes in and affects the marine and coastal ecosystems, and obviously impacts on fishing industry, on tourism, and on the very well-being of those fragile ecosystems. And here then we have this tool of marine protected areas that provides some very critical and helpful benefits. It helps fishing communities increase yields. It may sound counterintuitive, but it does, and I'll speak to this. It can really drive green tourism, and obviously, as we are in the middle of a pandemic and extraordinary circumstances, contribute to green and blue recovery. But at a time when marine biodiversity is under threat, I want to highlight that marine protected areas, they do play a critical role. They provide for refuge for endangered and commercially fished species. And they allow the species there to recover and restore. They provide critical habitats from damage by some destructive fishing practices that we know. And that is obviously often where fish spawn, where they reproduce, and where they grow into adult size. A World Bank study on overfishing found that reduced overfishing could allow severely overexploited fish stocks to recover over time. May sound counterintuitive. You fish less and actually your fish stocks will recover. You put in place some control on fishing and communities will earn more. So there are some real opportunities here for combining economic welfare and poverty reduction with smart protection. And we understand that marine protected areas may generate more than 4 to 12 times greater fishery yields in the long term. So I want to mention one example of really the kind of stewardship that can be put into place in a context where indeed Ecuador has been a primary mover. I'm talking here about the marine corridor of the Eastern Tropical Pacific, the CMAR, which comprises Costa Rica, the Coco National Park, Panama, Coipa National Park, Colombia, the Gorgona, and the Malepo, and of course, the very, very significant and important Galapagos National Park and Marine Reserve. And what we've seen, obviously created in 2004, is that this transboundary example that these 4 excellent countries set to the world about finding ways of working together in enhancing collaboration across. This example is one that shows to the world not just what national management can do, but what collaborative, coordinated marine protection can really achieve. And for me, being the head of UNEP, I can tell you that this is one of the examples that I often speak of to other countries, especially smaller countries, where what you really want to see is the connectivity over and above all. Mr. Minister, you referenced the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. And as we are tomorrow, we are meeting on the evening of the Heads of State Summit, excuse me. As we're meeting on the evening of the Heads of State Summit for biodiversity, it behooves me to say that in the Global Biodiversity Outlook that came out earlier last week, we find that not a single one of the Aichi targets is likely to be achieved, although we hope that the marine protected area will continue to push for increased protection towards the 10%, which is a small percentage, I would hasten to add, that was in the Aichi targets. But we are really looking at this point for member states to stretch, to step up, and to show real leadership, the kind of leadership that we know that Ecuador can show and has shown on the marine side. We're looking for that on the terrestrial and on the marine to get ambitious biodiversity framework. And here, in the context of our privileged role that we have in supporting the 18 regional seas conventions and action plans, we obviously work very much to ensure that this gets anchored. Because in the second target of the biodiversity framework, we're looking at the by 2030 protecting and preserving through well-connected and effective systems of protected areas, a significant percentage, at least, we hope 30% of the planet will focus on protection for biodiversity. And to date, we are nowhere near where we want to be. The latest numbers speak to around 7 to 8%. And so we have quite some way to journey. And the kind of leadership that is being shown today at this event is one that we really hope will continue to echo through all the other countries. On our side, knowing that unless we take action, we stand to lose about 1 million species out of the total of 7.8 million, including a significant amount of sea life and marine ecosystems, that is simply not viable. And so, as you rightly said, Mr. Minister, we need to look at the conventions as an indivisible set of agreements, because climate change is heating our oceans, because climate change is forcing acidification and increased ocean warming, and because we are seeing the warming of the oceans causing species shift and unreliable interdependent systems being broken, because pollution is interfering with ecosystems and reproduction, and obviously because direct biodiversity loss is leading to the undermining of the world as we know it. So we need to understand that these three planetary crises, the crisis of climate, the crisis of nature and biodiversity, and the crisis of pollution, are three of the very same. And it is only through our own unsustainable production and consumption that we are driving this. So the answers lie with us, turning around unsustainable production and consumption. And therefore ensuring, and at the same time ensuring, that we have in place the guardrails, the government policies, the global agreements that will lead us to long-term sustainability. I'm absolutely convinced that the work that we are seeing in your country on Galapagos and beyond will serve as a model for countries to come. And I thank you so very much for hosting this event. And it's a true honor to be part of it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Madam Anderson, Secretary Director of UNEP. With that, we'll move now to the panel. We have 6 persons, authorities and expert panelists that are very much engaged and have a long career and experience on biodiversity, marine biodiversity protection and sustainable management. Each of the panelists will have approximately 7 minutes. We are a little bit behind the schedule, but we'll move quicker to that segment. In that regard, it is my pleasure first to welcome and give the floor to Minister Norman Wright, President of the Council of the Government of the Special Regime of Galapagos. He has been in that position since 2019. He has studied law and environmental democracy and governance. He has an extensive experience in public administration and governance, human rights, and environmental issues. He was also city councilor of the Metropolitan District of Quito between 2009 and 2012, where he chaired the Gender Equity Commission, and he was also a member of the Environment Commission. Without further ado, please, Minister Wright, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be, an honor also to be with also distinguished authorities in sea issues and ocean conservation. So let me try to say some words and reflections about what we were doing in Galapagos, and for sure you are more capable of say better things because you have a more and a huge experience working in ocean issues. But what I want to share with you is our awareness about the moment and the special turning point that the world is facing right now. I think so that the pandemia learnings, or maybe if we can find some learnings about this experience of this year, this tragedy of this year that changed the life of the people and the communities and on the economy around the world, is that we have to take action, and we have to take action to go forward and go beyond the limits of what sometimes we were used to know as the way that things have to develop it in the world for development of the people and also for the economy of the world. And oceans is one of the arenas that really needs a lot of decision about the leadership of the world. And one of the awareness and the worries that we have right now is that even the human beings after crisis, big crisis, it happened in the Second World War, and this pandemic crisis, another big crisis, is not a war, but it is also something that stopped all the economy around the world, and is a great menace that we were facing these last months. All these crises push the human beings to get into life again with a great ambition of trying to get back to the things that they used to do before the crisis. And I think so that this is one of the greatest worries that we have, because it means a lot of consumption. It means at the same time a lot of pressure over natural resources, and ocean is not far away of them. I think so that this moment ocean is suffering a lot of pressure from most of the things that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Luis Gallegos, already said, and also Ms. Anderson. But also ocean is going to suffer the pressure of poverty and inequality, and as a consequence of the pandemic. And the pressure of poverty and inequality is going to be something that really is going to be really hard to stop in the world that we are facing before COVID-19. It's not, maybe that's one of the reasons, because tomorrow, as we know, there's going to be a world pledge of many of more than 16 leaders around the world that they are asking to put wildlife and climate at the heart of a post-COVID recovery plans. And I think so that one of the reasons because we are here right now is to say that we should be part of this pledge around the world. I hope so that the majority of the leaders around the world could be connected to this necessity, because if not, what we are going to face in the next years we're going to find in the next years the result of having a lot of pressure over our natural resources, because we're trying to recover our economies from the effects of the pandemic in the life of the people. And Galapagos is not aware of this situation. Galapagos, we were an economy that we are highly dependent of tourism. 85–90% of our economy depends on tourism, and tourism right now is stopped around the world, also in Galapagos. And this economy situation also opened the possibility of generating more pressure over natural resources. Fishery and other kind of pressures could be maybe a situation that can be justified by the economy crisis that we are living. So the moment is really a turning point, because the big question is how we're going to face these challenges, finding the balance between giving the opportunity that conservation of nature, conservation of the oceans could be also an opportunity for the life of the people. I'm truly convinced that if you invest in people, you invest in conservation. And I think so that right now, Galapagos is asking to the world that we need more Galapagos, because if we need more Galapagos, we are going to have more protection of biodiversity in the oceans. And we're going to have also the opportunity to have even industrial activity in the Pacific Eastern tropical seascape, because Galapagos is the nursery of life in the Eastern Pacific. The role of Galapagos, not only for biodiversity that by itself, for conservation, that is really a big issue, is also for the economic activity of the economy, also of the coastal economy of all South America, and also for other places around the world. So any decision that we take in a global framework, thinking for the conservation of Galapagos, supporting the conservation of their biodiversity, is a decision that have an impact in the planet. So we really need to find this balance of supporting the life of the people in Galapagos, but also supporting conservation. We need to find the way to how conservation and also sustainability and also circular economy and also renewable energy and also being better in the management of our urban planning could be an answer also in the economy and the life of the people in Galapagos, and also in the life of the people in the continent at the same time. Because if not, the economic crisis that we are living right now is going to open more pressure over our natural resources. And the situation is very complex for countries as Ecuador in Latin America. For just an example, this year in April, May, and June of this year, Ecuador received $55 million from oil activities in his national budget. In 2019, in the same period, we received 555 million. And we were in crisis in 2019. So just is a little example of all the economic pressure that we are suffering right now. And I think so that we have to be really strategic in the way we want to invest for conservation, linked to the life of the people and opportunities for them. Galapagos could be a great place for find these innovation answers for the world by itself. I think so that Galapagos is still being a living lab of what we have to do in a better way to conserve our oceans, and also to conserve the life of the people, and also to find solutions not only for Galapagos, also around for all the planet in all these big challenges that we're going to face. Well, we were facing them in the climate change crisis because it's still there, but also for the life of the people in the post-COVID era. We need more Galapagos, and we need more Galapagos in the protection of the role that we have with our marine reserve right now. As you know, Galapagos is home of more of 3,000 marine species, 500 of which are endemic to the archipelago. Galapagos has connectivity with many other areas in the region, but also far from the region as well. Along the Cocos Ridge, hammerhead and silky shark move back and forth from Galapagos to Cocos. Olive riddle sea turtles also move back and forth. Blue whales seem close to the Galapagos every year, while humpback whales feed in the area. It is even possible to see orcas from time to time. And it's not a rare mistake of the nature. Extraordinary food abundance in the Galapagos is the result of the confluence of the Humboldt, Equatorial, and the Panama currents, making it one of the most attractive regions food-wise for highly migratory species. There are those who see this abundance as a reason to exploit the commercially valuable species such as yellowfin, skipjack, and big-eyed tuna. So Galapagos suffers a double fishing pressure coming from both the Ecuadorian fleets and also the international fleets, more and more interested in the area as a result of the higher relative abundance in comparison to other regions of the planet. So when we were talking about protecting Galapagos and finding ways to generate buffer zones to all these great environmental service that Galapagos give around all the world in the region, we need a support of the global framework to do that. So my reflections today is that yes, we need more Galapagos. We need more Galapagos. We need more Galapagos to sustain thousands of livelihoods that depend on the naturally attractive of the archipelago, which has been a magnet for tourism throughout the years. We need more Galapagos to contribute to guarantees Ecuador's food security for many generations to come, and more Galapagos to help industry have better catches once we all invest on a larger spillover that they can legally catch outside. More Galapagos to help sustain healthy populations of highly migratory species, and more Galapagos to help the planet keep one of its most important marine ecosystems. I hope that we can find in this forum of the United Nations Assembly the possibility to reflect of the importance of such areas as Galapagos and other biodiversity and marine protected areas around the world as an opportunity of thinking in future from the present, and with really strategic action and really fast action right now to prevent the possibility of the disappearance of these highly and wiki ecosystems that we have in Galapagos, but at the same time that are the base of the incredible biodiversity around the world. And for sure, we can find the ways to work together also with the industry, using dialogue and really commitment for the future, because we believe, in my case, I think in conservation. But at the same time, I believe that if we protect our areas, that it will be also good for the economy and for the life of the people. So we have to find the ways to manage these areas as Galapagos in a better way than we used to do it in the past. We have been doing a lot of things for many years since Galapagos was declared a natural heritage of UNESCO. A lot of public policy, incredible work of the national park, a lot of commitment.
So you'd be so kind to wrap up, please, because we need to move to the other panelists, okay. Please.
Sorry, I'm inspired with Galapagos, but as you can tell. And with a lot of effort of Ecuador for many years, maybe one of the strategic public policy of the country was to maintain a real commitment with Galapagos. But right now is the moment to see how we can generate better protection for them. And maybe an option is to discuss to increase protected areas, marine protected areas with sustainable management around Galapagos in the economic exclusive zone around the marine reserve. This may be an option. We are discussing that. We don't know where it's going to happen, but it's the turning point that the world is asking right now for us, how to think in the present with the learnings of the COVID-19 and the history of the world before the crisis, and how to face these challenges for the future for all the planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. It is my pleasure to give the floor now to Mr. Roque Sevilla. He's a member of the Public-Private Partnership of Galapagos. Mr. Sevilla has studied economy and public administration. In 1976, he created the Nature Foundation. He was appointed in the past as director of WWF for Nature, and he was also assigned in 1997 as member of the board of directors of WWF International. In 1992, he was a city councilor for the Metropolitan District of Quito. Mr. Sevilla was part of the Ecuadorian National Assembly that drafted the new constitution, and he was mayor of Quito between 1998 and 2000. In private business, he has started the first company, corporate group, Grupo Futuro, which is integrated for 14 leading companies in the services sector of tourism industries. In 2018, he was named as one of the most important and respected businessmen in Ecuador, and he also received recognitions and highlighted the professional career and innovation of Mr. Sevilla in tourist development. With that, it is my pleasure to give the floor now to you, Mr. Sevilla, please.
Thank you, Walter, for your presentation, and it is a pleasure for me to be in this wonderful panel that deals with one of the biggest threats that we have, and that is losing the capacity of our seas, both in the food and the oxygen of our planet. So it is really a huge effort that we must do to create the balance between human beings and the sea. I'm really honored to be part of this private-public agreement that the government of Ecuador decided a few months ago. I want to speak of a very specific thing, and it refers to what makes a marine area really to function, because we can do the best efforts in the political and in the scientific area, and nothing will happen unless we have a solid financial structure that allows us to see the efforts in the long term. Marine areas that really work are marine areas that are well controlled and that deal with all the users in an effective manner. We are proposing a model that might be a good example of what we could do in other marine areas. And we're proposing that the Ecuadorian government, other countries committed with the preservation of life in the seas, NGOs that refer also to the conservation of marine areas, and users of the reserve, both tourists and fisheries, contribute to the establishment of the resources needed for the management of the marine area. The basic proposal is to establish a trust fund managed independently that will have the Ecuadorian government as the first donor, with a commitment of covering each dollar that is donated with the same amount by the Ecuadorian government. Additional to the users of the marine area that could contribute in a voluntary manner, and that would be the tourism industry and the fleets that fish in that area. We think that their support with donations could reckon the benefits they are receiving from the protection. As Ms. Anderson said, and also Mr. Ryan, about the positive effects for fisheries that are near or are part of a marine area. So there is a lot of reason that the users should pay for it. Of course, the case of tourism is a very clear one that we should charge it both by the operators that operate on the marine area and also by the tourists that arrive, in this case to the Galapagos area, that they would pay an additional fee to preserve the marine area. We are also inviting the international entities, other countries, and NGOs to be part of this trust fund that will allow the management of the marine area in the long term. When we're talking about the real cost of the operation, it is around $4 million per year, and that would demand probably an $80 million trust fund. And the Ecuadorian government could issue bonds for $40 million. And with those 5% interest, we would have already 50% of the cost of the management of the marine area. So the rest is the effort we must all do to really protect such an incredible marine area that we're going to hear from the experts why it is so important. Again, if we manage to get the financial support and we have the political and scientific help, then we will probably do a wonderful work in this new projected marine area in the Galapagos. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sevilla, for your presentation and also for keeping it within the time. It is my pleasure now to give the floor to Ms. Sylvia Earle. She's a very well-known biologist and explorer in residence at the National Geographic Society. Ms. Earle has also worked at there since 1998, and she is a former chief scientist for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the NOAA. She's also founder of the Sea Alliance, which partnered with the National Geographic on Mission Blue, and she has been working in different initiatives aiming at restoring health and productivity to the ocean. She was named one by the Time magazine as a heroes of the planet, as one of the heroes of the planet. Ms. Sylvia has pioneered research on marine ecosystems with a special focus on exploration, conservation, and new technologies. She has led more than 100 of expeditions, logged over 7,000 hours underwater, and she has authored more than 190 scientific, technical, and popular publications. It is a pleasure to have you here. Please, Ms. Earle, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. All of you, it's an honor to be in your presence. Mr. Minister, to hear from you. I have a special place in my heart, in my life, for the Galapagos Islands. As a young scientist in 1966, I traveled there as a part of a research expedition. There were no automobiles at all. Now there are traffic jams, stoplights. Population has increased from 1,000 people in the mid-1960s to many more times that number, plus the large number of visitors who come. What was possible to take from the sea when there were 1,000 people, just looking at their local consumption, was on a different scale than what we now face for the Galapagos Islands, where so many more people actually reside there, but also export to distant markets. We now know so much that was not knowable in the 1960s, or even 10 years ago. What we now have that should give all of us cause for hope, is what we now know and understand that was not known when policies were put in place years ago, when habits were formed years ago, when tastes for dining on ocean wildlife were formed years ago. But we have to face up to the current reality that if we are to save, restore, and reach a point of making peace with the ocean, of having a restored ocean that is healthy, we have to think in terms, realistically, of how much can be taken from the ocean without further disrupting what's already been seriously impaired. You can look at the numbers all over the world, but you can look specifically at what has happened in the Galapagos, where initially, again, when I was there, the ocean was regarded as open for business. The land, starting in 1959, began to achieve significant protection, and still does. The ocean, it took a while before recognition of the importance of ocean wildlife and the connection to wildlife on the land came into focus. We have that now. You know, we cannot protect flightless cormorants or the boobies or the sea lions or the penguins unless we protect the ocean. That's where they go for food. That's what keeps not just the Galapagos Islands, the ocean, safe in terms of climate, in terms of maintaining stability. It's something that we now can see and understand and put on the balance sheet. Humans are so terrestrial by nature, we are. It's taken a long time for us to really understand why the ocean matters. Well, my fellow panelists have already made a really good case for showing why the ocean matters and also the state of the ocean today, not the way it was 50 years ago. Our goal is to think 50 years ahead, or even 10 years, perhaps the most important 10 years in all of humankind. Certainly the most important in the next 10,000 years, because what we do or what we fail to do right now will shape the future in a magnified way. We're right on the edge on so many fronts. Climate, of course, are what we put into the atmosphere, but it's also what we take out of the ocean. At the World Economic Forum earlier this year, a really strong case was made, the link between life in the ocean, blue carbon, especially whales, and climate. The ocean is the big climate and carbon anchor. I hope that we can find strategic means to look at the real basis of the economy, not just of the Galapagos, but of the whole world, where we have been accounting for the ocean as free goods. Fish have an accounting base of 0. But how can that be when we now know, with respect to how the planet functions, the carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, oxygen cycle, the way the world functions is anchored into the living ocean. And we have in the past thought of the ocean primarily as a place where we can take things out and where we can put things in. That's how we've used the ocean. But going forward, armed with knowledge, the value of the ocean is really coming sharply into focus. And I so applaud the government, the leaders in Ecuador, the people, the scientists, and yes, the fishermen who understand if you don't take care of the ocean and safeguard really large areas where the fish and other wildlife are safe, it's going to continue to unravel. I have been a witness over the years that I have been privileged to come as a visitor to the Galapagos, as a scientist, as a witness to the changes, the loss of the big grouper, the loss of the sea cucumbers, the loss of the lobsters, the loss of the hammerhead sharks, and the other sharks. They're still there. That's the good news. It's not too late to restore, to recover, and ultimately to make peace, find the balance of what we can take, but the large and significantly expanded area that is as protected in the ocean as we accord to the land. We understand. You can't kill the penguins and still have penguins. You can't just kill the iguanas in large numbers and still have iguanas. You have to have safeguards, safe havens where they can really have peace. And of course we will use them because they're part of our life support system. They're part of what makes it possible to have a planet that works in our favor, where we can have air that unlike other parts of the universe, we have a living planet. But it's that biodiversity, it's the little bits and pieces of life working together that maintain our life support system, our planet. The Galapagos is such a miracle of what we can learn from how systems work, land and sea together, with people in the equation, to extrapolate that on a much more global scale. If we can't manage to figure it out for the Galapagos, it's cause for a real worry. But I'm confident, looking at actions already underway, expanding full protection for large areas of the ocean, just as large areas of the land have been protected, is a recipe for survival. We're talking 30% of the planet by 2030, a good start. We have to respect all of it and treat all of it with care. Our lives depend on it. I thank you, the people of Ecuador, you, the people of the Galapagos, you, the leaders who have choices, options, opportunities right now, as never before, to secure an enduring future for not just the people, but the wildlife on the land and in the sea. And it all ties together. Wildlife on the land, wildlife in the sea now need people, need you, need all of us to do what it takes to secure a future that involves all of us. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Earle. And it is my pleasure now to give the floor to Ms. Jessica Battle. She's a senior global ocean governance and policy expert at the WWF International. She has worked there since 2002. She has an extensive experience in ocean governance, including habitat protection and fisheries. She has studied marine biology, environmental policy, and ocean law, as well as journalism. She has led WWF's work on fisheries crime, including at the UN Crime Commission. She has participated at negotiations of FAO Port State Measures Agreement and at the IMO FAO IUU discussions. She has led the WWF's work on amicus curiae in the International Tribunal of Law, the Sea Case 21 on illegal fishing. Since a decade, she has been leading the WWF delegation to the UN on oceans matter, including the BBNJ treaty negotiations and the UN conference. She has participated in the Deep Sea Conservation Coalition and the OCDE panels on IUU fishing. She has very recently addressed the linkage between marine protection and fisheries in the Galapagos and global governance, including flag state responsibility. With that, it is my pleasure to give the floor now. Ms. Battle, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me all right? Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends of the ocean, and of course, your deepness. I am so honored to be speaking on this panel. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak on behalf of WWF on this important event and this important topic of marine conservation. It is really hard to follow Sylvia, but I will do my best. I will zoom out a little bit from the Galapagos for a moment and talk a little bit broader about the ocean and ocean governance. Nowhere in the ocean is entirely unaffected by humans. WWF's Living Planet report that was released only a few weeks ago this month reports that only 13% of the world's total ocean area is considered to be wilderness today. Waste and marine litter is found even deep in ocean trenches, and human pressures are only increasing over time. And I will not go through all the various threats and activities that have been listed by others already on this panel, but the resulting decline, serious decline in ocean health, in ecosystems and marine life have really negative consequences, of course, for ocean-based economies, such as that of Galapagos, of Ecuador, of many developing countries in particular, and especially for coastal communities that are dependent upon these resources for livelihoods and food security, but also for wider goods and services, such as food provision, climate regulation, carbon storage, and coastal protection that marine ecosystems provide to us humans. What is really important, though, and which was already pointed out earlier today, is that we need to properly evaluate these resources and these services in order to persuade decision makers and businesses to participate in the protection of these resources into the future. And as the program leaflet sets out, international cooperation is crucial to strengthen this conservation and sustainable use across boundaries. of marine biodiversity, and we did a lot more of it, a lot more political will. And one reason for this is that marine life doesn't really know any boundaries. Migratory species such as tunas and sharks, turtles and whales roam across large ocean distances, out on the high seas, into coastal and even nearshore waters, around the Galapagos and elsewhere, where there are important resources for local fishers and tourism operators, for example. Fishing for human consumption is considered to have the greatest impact of any in situ activity on ocean biodiversity, causing about a third of assessed fish stocks, this is assessed fish stocks, so not all fish stocks are assessed, to be considered overfished, and leading, as Mrs. Anderson pointed out, to bycatch of many species and taxa. Today, we have begun to really see that efforts to manage fisheries in isolation from the wider ecosystem and in isolation from cumulative pressures are not working. The curves are bending the wrong way. Fisheries management and protection of marine biodiversity are not two separate tracks, they are highly intertwined. Fish are part of the ocean ecosystem. They do end up on our plates and in our cooking pots, but before then they are part of the web of life that is so crucial for sustaining us. Too often there's a false separation of these two sides of the same coin, and this really needs to change. MPAs can and must play a role in restoring and managing fish stocks, both near shore and in deeper waters, both within and beyond national jurisdiction. But also outside protected areas, and Sylvia pointed this out as well, that we do need to make sure that we take care of the entire ocean. It is very good and absolutely crucial to establish protected areas and highly protected areas, no take zones and so forth. But we mustn't forget the rest of the ocean. If we set a target of 30%, which is a good target for protection, we mustn't forget the 70% outside. We do need also to manage those 70% through an ecosystem-based and integrated ocean management framework, because it is all interlinked. And fisheries, coming back to fisheries, must be managed with climate change, food security and nutritional security, livelihoods and ecosystem resilience in mind. Increasing resilience of existing natural systems and also of coastal communities can help protect vulnerable ecosystems and more effectively deliver the sound and equitable use of coastal ecosystems that we do need. This again was emphasized by Mr. Rai. And of course, the current pandemic that we are living through in various ways and with different impacts in different parts of the planet, it undermines all the three pillars of sustainable development, both social, economic, and environmental. And it only underscores this integrated approach that we need to take on oceans. And as natural resources are becoming more depleted, both on land and in coastal waters, also the high seas and the deep seas are not exempt from the increasingly attracting attention that has been increasingly attracted from industries. And even though we might think they're far from shore and inaccessible, of course, for most of us, those species and ecosystem here are under increasing pressure, and they are linked to coastal systems. And various international rules and regulations for operations of vessels, both ships in commercial shipping, for example, and for fishing and activity on the ocean already exist. And a central tenet in ocean governance is, as you all know, the responsibility of the flag state. There's also the responsibility of the coastal state, and the responsibility also, I would like to maintain, of a market state in the case of fishing in order to uphold these rules. But the flag state is really important when it comes to the control of vessels, whether they are fishing, whether they are transiting through an area, how these vessels are behaving, that they are behaving according to internationally agreed rules, regulations, and standards, that is a flag state responsibility. And unfortunately, at times and far too often, this flag state responsibility is not being exercised to the best effect. And this problem is making it also a very heavy list for states that are being affected by this lack of responsibility and who have to pay for damage. It's a very heavy list, and a lot of times coastal states and poorer communities lose out.
Yes, I can. If it's okay.
Right now, there's a window of opportunity, however, to help bring these agreements into a coherent framework and create this common integrated approach to ocean management based on the ecosystem. This is the negotiations that were mentioned earlier today by the Minister of an international legally binding ocean treaty, the BBNJ for short. It stands for Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction. And this treaty could, if there is political will, create a true culture shift in ocean governance. Political will is a must. We need a lot more of it to succeed also in these negotiations that are ongoing at the moment, and which all of the states here and many others are taking part in. And if states grasp this moment and see the seriousness that's been pointed out by panelists before me, we could see more responsibility, more flag state responsibility, more coastal responsibility, in particular more collaboration across boundaries and across sectors to create this integrated approach that we need to establish protected areas and to ensure that also areas outside of protected areas are being managed with the ecosystem and long-term ocean health in mind. And what's important here is to enhancing the cooperation between all players, between states and between sectors. And this is probably an aspect that might even be difficult inside a country where you have different ministers dealing with different sectors. Also inside countries, this integration is obviously needed, both for internal domestic marine governance, but also for collaborating across borders and in international fora. It is what the ocean needs, it's what the planet needs. And one really important aspect of this treaty, if we get it right, is the capacity to establish marine protected areas on the high seas. And to significantly then, through this capacity, reach the goals of hopefully 30% of protected areas, well-connected, representative and effectively managed protected areas across the planet, but also other effective area-based conservation measures to cover the rest of the ocean that needs higher level of management. Achieving this through what we call a next generation protected area planning and management would contribute significantly to rebuilding fisheries and protecting the critical coastal and marine habitats and the ecosystem functions that we all depend on. It is important to remember that we have to protect areas that support and benefit both people and biodiversity. It's not an either or. And as Mr. Sevilla spoke about, we have to effectively manage MPAs so that they can deliver on their promise of the valuable ecosystem services. Then they can pay their way in food security, carbon sequestration, coastal protection, tourism opportunities, fisheries, and other contributions to the ocean economy. And to finish off, I think a very, very crucial point here is that we need to evaluate these ecosystem services in such a way that it makes sense also for those who are counting the dollars, counting the pennies, that this is so important for us as humanity to protect. It's not always possible to put the monetary benefit, but some kind of a relative value on these services will be crucial in order to make the case for the protection of these areas. I do not know whether it is possible to everywhere do what Mr. Sevilla spoke about. in areas where there is tourism and where there is a possibility to bring in money from elsewhere, that might be possible. In other areas, we might have to find other solutions, but we need to be creative and we need to be innovative. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Blatter, and thank you also for making the connections between the different your previous speakers. It is my pleasure now to give the floor to Ms. Susana Cárdenas. She is a professor and researcher at the Universidad San Francisco of Quito, Ecuador. She's co-director of the Institute of Applied Ecology at that university. She holds the title of Doctor of Philosophy in Ecology from the University of California and a BA in Finance and Economics from the Universidad San Francisco de Quito. She is a specialist in economics of natural resources, evaluation of ecosystem services and biodiversity, strategic planning for conservation, analysis of environmental policies, and tourism, economics, island ecosystems, and protected areas. With that introduction, it's my pleasure to give the floor now. Ms. Cárdenas, please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? Yes. First, I would like to thank to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Ecuador, especially to Mr. Chancellor Gallegos for this invitation. For me, it's a truly honor to be here with these distinguished panels and guests, and also to have the opportunity to share with you some of the research and some of the information that we have been, like a whole team. I am representing here a very big team of different researchers that have been putting together a lot of information, amazing information about pelagic environments in the Galapagos and beyond the Galapagos in the intertropical Pacific. So I want to share these slides that maybe will have a visual also effect of the key data and the key interesting results or preliminary results that we are having. First, as we have seen, and the other panelists have already mentioned, the Galapagos Marine Reserve was created in 1998. It's one of the most important marine protected areas in the intertropical Pacific. And of course, with an amazing biodiversity, high endemism, high productivity, and all of these thanks to all the current systems and the congruence of all these different oceanic features that all of them come together in Galapagos. But Galapagos is part of a system, right? When we talk about in the Eastern Tropical Pacific, the Galapagos Marine Reserve is one of the marine protected areas that are here. And one of the main questions that we have is, especially for the oceanic and the pelagic environment, is this oceanic MPA network enough for the Tropical Pacific? We know, and also Mrs. Anderson has mentioned all these interesting initiatives that we have as the Eastern Tropical Pacific Corridor, that is a very interesting public government initiative that is supported also by many different institutions, from scientific institutions and also non-governmental institutions. But in terms of protected areas itself, one of the main research questions that we are trying to answer is if this is enough. One of the main growing concern is what is happening in those pelagic environments that are beyond these protected areas, and what is happening with all these key marine megafauna also that depends on these environments, right? So here are in these pictures all these really iconic species that are pelagic, that doesn't understand boundaries, national boundaries, and go beyond protected areas. So some of the findings that we have been contrasting also from the past to the present. Here we have a list of at least 25 species, pelagic, migratory, marine species. These are global distributions or global assessments, but we have seen that in these last 25 years, most of them have been their vulnerability, their threat status has increased. Just few of them have not changed. Just one of them improved, and most of the species also have entered this list of threatened species. That is globally. What is happening at the regional level, right? At the regional level, we are also trying to put together information from the Eastern Tropical Pacific, and we have here that some of the most important endangered species in the region, for example, the scallop hammerhead shark and the Pacific leatherback sea turtle, the Tortuga laúd, both of them are showing really declines in their populations. So this is important to understand, to follow up, to monitor, and to see what we can do to help these species to recover. Also, but this not only marine migratory species or endangered species, also commercial species. This is data from the ITTC, the International Tuna Commission. Of course, in our region, we are very fortunate to have a very high productivity. Fisheries are not doing bad, right? But there is some variability, and also there is a lot of uncertainty behind. We don't know how these fisheries will cope up with climate change effects, and also we are starting to see some initial warnings, especially if some of the effort is being increased, but using some certain devices as the fisheries aggregator devices, right? So not really showing decreases, but there is some uncertainty behind and initial warnings that we have to pay attention. We are starting to understand a lot of how the patterns of habitat use of these species. This is amazing data that has been collected throughout the years, and it shows that species like the whale sharks are moving beyond these areas that you can see, beyond Cocos, beyond Malpelo, beyond Galapagos. They just go beyond these areas and are using different specific zones within the Intertropical Pacific. Also here we have another species, the hammerhead sharks, for example. In the case of the hammerhead sharks, we are looking at interesting connectivity results in Galapagos, right, between Darwin and Wolf, but also outside Galapagos when they have interesting and important areas for foraging beyond Galapagos and into the economic exclusive zone in Ecuador, but also an interesting and already confirmed connectivity with Cocos Island, right? What is all of this? All of this gives us a really nice map of connectivity of all these marine migratory species, right, in the region, in the Intertropical Pacific. We can see connectivity between the oceanic islands, but also an important connectivity with the mainland in South America, in Central America, right? And this is very important because this is important for different stages of the life history of these species, but also this shows us that in some species, in some areas they are protected, and in others there are still a lot that we can do to help their protection and their survival. So what we are doing now, we are integrating all this amazing data that we have, right, to inform marine spatial management. We have here some different maps that show different species and how their movements, what are the main connectivity areas, how much they are moving beyond Galapagos, the other protected areas in the region, into the economic exclusive zones in the region, but also beyond that in international waters. So this is very interesting because this is one of the layers that inform analysis for marine spatial planning and protection. Not only species, right? Another thing that is very important to see and to consider are key habitats in the pelagic environments in the Intertropical Pacific. One of those are seamounts, right? We know here are different seamounts depending on the depth, right? In the Intertropical Pacific, we can see how Galapagos have this important platform, which actually explains a lot of the diversity, richness, and productivity that we have in Galapagos, but also these important ridges that connect Galapagos to the other areas in the Intertropical Pacific. These are very important ecosystems. They are the reason why there are a lot of productivity also in certain areas of the ocean, and also for fisheries, very important ecosystems. We are trying to understand these pelagic ecosystems, right? And also doing some surveys in these key habitats, key seamounts, to see what type of species they are, what is the interaction between endangered marine species, migratory species, but also commercial species. The analysis that we are doing at the moment is based on an ecosystem approach. We have already seen from other panelists this important idea of including an ecosystem approach in all our evaluations for future management and future conservation, for designing future conservation priorities, right? So in this ecosystem approach, we are putting together ecological process, we are putting together physical aspects as seamounts, key species and their migratory routes, but also, of course, we have to include human activities, main human activities, and we are talking, when we are talking about the pelagic environment, we have to include one of the main stakeholders that are the fisheries, right? So how we are doing this, mainly doing this through evaluating potential costs, the opportunities cost of fisheries, if we are assessing different potential scenarios for increased protection. This is important. Why this is important? Why it is important to do this, to think about this, to integrate all the knowledge in an ecosystem based approach? Because we are facing new and future challenges for marine conservation, right? We have already heard about the different challenges that we have regarding climate change, increasing fishing effort, also potential issues in governance in these marine regions, right? All of these will be creating some effects, right, regarding plastic waste, reduction in catches, in abundance of species, ecosystem level impacts that will be disturbances in all the natural flow of the systems. But most importantly, all of these will also affect us, right? We all know that all of these impacts can be affecting food security in our well-being in the long terms in terms of risky food security, but another also economic and social impact. So it's important to see all these connections and why this is important to start talking about increasing marine protection and marine conservation. But also not only challenges, also we have to think about the benefits, all the benefits that these type of exercises give for all society, right? We have here two of these more important ones. We need to guarantee provision of these ecosystem services in the long run. And also one of these benefits will be moving towards reaching the goals and targets of the 23 Agenda for Sustainable Development. All of us are talking the same language here with these goals and targets that we have, but the idea is that we recognize and be aware of these benefits. So I will just give you 4 benefits that are very key in this idea of potential expansions and potential increasing marine protection. One important benefit has to do with the increase in fisheries productivity, right? This is a study in 2018 that showed that the marine reserve, after 15 years of implementation, was showing an important fishery productivity increase in this southwest region, right? The southwest region. And this is important because it's proving that we have an spillover effect. Marine reserves act as an important regions to provide the spillover effects and benefits outside them, right? And this study with using, right, all the long-term trends in catches prove this. But also this is important, and we think also in the long term, more long term, is in terms of food security. If we still have very well managed marine reserves that will be giving spillovers in the long run, we are securing food availability for our society in the next decades, in the following years. So this is very connected to the Sustainable Development Goals. Another important benefit is in the case of the migratory species, these iconic species are very important for marine tourism. We know that these species are located in these specific marine protected areas. Darwin Wolf here, you can see in Galapagos, which is the place with the very high biomass of sharks, especially hammerhead sharks, right? Malpelo, cocos. All of these are important for tourism, and the main attraction are these iconic species. So guaranteeing healthy population of these species will also be important for maintaining the benefits from tourism. And this is very important in the long term as well. Also, not only, you just have 2 more, thank you. Not only thinking about fisheries productivity, food security, or tourism benefits, but also there are other more ecosystem services. Here quickly, just a study in 2016 find out that measuring all these different ecosystem services in the Isotropical Pacific give us a potential estimate of $15 billion, including carbon storage and other services beyond fisheries and tourism. Importantly, also climate change, right? other panelists already have mentioned, but there are some projections, important projections, that Galapagos will be less affected than other areas, according to the projections of the IPCC. However, these are good news because of the resilience of this region, but also that also makes a warning that maybe that will increase the fishing pressure in this area of the East-tropical Pacific. So we have to consider this and think, how do we want to manage this to also provide this long-term sustainability of these resources in the future. I just want to mention very quick that this is a work of many, many different institutions together, and with the support of many different organizations as well. And this is to end. I am citing here Sylvia Arles and one of her quotes, right? We need to think on the oceans to take care of them because our life depends on them. And these are the important connections that we have to think when considering future conservation in the marine environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cárdenas. It is clear that we're going to go a little bit beyond the time that we have foreseen for this event. We will still have the last presentation and also allow sometimes to present to the panelists some of the questions that have been put in the Zoom room and through the YouTube channel as well. So very briefly, Mr. Jeffrey LeBlanc will be our last but not least panelist. He's advisor to the Minister of Production, Foreign Trade, Investment and Fisheries of Ecuador, and founder of the Foundation Mare Nostrum, a foundation dedicated to the ocean conservation. He was recognized in 2018 as an ocean youth leader by the Economist and Sustainable Ocean Alliance, and he has played a key role in the creation of various conservation measures and campaigns. He holds a Master in International Law from University College of London and other titles from University of Manchester and St. Francis Xavier University. Please, Mr. LeBlanc, you have the floor. And after that, we'll proceed immediately, so I can invite you to be as short as possible. Thank you, Mr. LeBlanc. You have the floor.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. And of course, a special thanks to Minister Gallegos and our permanent mission to the United Nations for putting together such a fantastic event. I know the main topic for today is marine protected areas, but I would like to focus my part of this session on other measures and technologies that I consider to be very important for the conservation of the Galapagos, as well as the entire region. As mentioned, I work as an advisor at the Ministry of Production, Foreign Trade, Investments and Fisheries. And earlier this year, I was fortunate to be able to lead an initiative with our Vice Minister of Fisheries, Andres Arens, to prohibit the catch and commercialization of various shark species. You know, as apex predators, sharks are incredibly important for the health of our entire ecosystem, and that is why special attention needs to be given to ensuring proper conservation measures are put in place. And when I first got involved with this, I was shocked to learn that certain critically endangered species, such as the scalloped hammerhead, an iconic species in the Galapagos, were essentially without any form of protection, or any meaningful protection anyway. This was the case despite the fact that this species by itself brings in tourists from all around the world and contributes significantly to the local economy. So following various sessions with leading experts, the WWF, Universidad San Francisco, and other government institutions, we were finally able to gain enough support to prohibit the catch and commercialization of the scalloped hammerhead, the great hammerhead, smooth hammerhead, shovel hammerhead, and also the oceanic whitetip. It was a historic achievement because prior to this prohibition, only a handful of shark species were ever provided full protection here in Ecuador. And some of them, such as the great white shark and basking shark, are not even found in our waters. As my friend Alex says, we may as well have been banning the hunting of giraffes. But the good news is that for these recent prohibitions, I really can't stress enough their importance. It was a great example of cooperation amongst various entities, and I hope we see more species added to this list very soon. The problem that remains, however, which has been mentioned, repeatedly today, is that these measures, only apply here in Ecuador, and we are dealing with highly migratory species that often move beyond our national jurisdiction. So once a scalloped hammerhead or an oceanic whitetip move into the high seas or into the exclusive economic zones of other countries, they can lose this protection. That is why we are very interested in working closely with our ocean neighbors, such as Peru, Colombia, Costa Rica, to try and create some uniformity throughout the region when it comes to protecting specific species. And while on the topic of shark conservation, I just want to say that the threat of foreign fishing vessels around our exclusive economic zone has certainly captured the world's attention. And I truly hope that what happened, highlights above all the importance of protecting the high seas. Over 400 years have passed since Hugo Grotius published his dissertation Mare Liberum. And since then, not much has really changed. International laws continue to cling on to age-old principles that are no longer practical. And the fact that over 73,000 hours of fishing by foreign vessels were logged in just 1 month outside of the Galapagos proves that. And if we go back to 2017, the one foreign fishing vessel that was caught in our exclusive economic zone had over 6,600 sharks on board, many of them endangered or critically endangered, such as the scalloped hammerhead, whale shark, among others. I think our government's willingness to join the Global Ocean Alliance demonstrates that we are committed to seeing 30% of the oceans protected by 2030, but we also understand that this is something that cannot happen overnight and requires a tremendous amount of international cooperation. Therefore, when it comes to the conservation of sharks, we realize that we need to act very quickly to create even stronger national measures. And I'm happy to inform you all that we've recently created a government campaign to reduce the internal consumption of shark throughout the country. Our ministry is working alongside our Ministry of Environment and also our Ministry of Tourism on a campaign that we call Acción Tiburón, Shark Action, to help reduce the internal consumption of shark by implementing various phases that focus on everything from education to receiving shark-free commitments. So for example, if a restaurant or hotel would like to be given authorization to use the Acción Tiburón emblem in their establishment, they will need to complete a short course and also sign a commitment letter saying that they will not sell or serve any shark products. The same applies to fishermen or anyone else looking to join the campaign. And when it comes to education, this campaign will go far beyond issues of conservation because we were also very concerned with the health risks associated with eating shark due to the high levels of mercury and other dangerous toxins. I think what is particularly concerning for here in Ecuador and other parts of the region is that there are many consumers consuming shark without actually knowing, what they are eating. From work that has been done by the World Wildlife Foundation, we know that there is a lot of mislabeling taking place within local markets, which can then transition to restaurants, households, and so on. For that reason, it is especially important that a major part of this campaign focuses on tackling this issue through consumer education programs, educating inspectors, and creating more awareness in general. But of course, similar to the species-specific measures that I mentioned earlier, our objective is to see this campaign go beyond Ecuador and for other countries to join Acción Tiburón, or for other countries to at least adopt similar measures. Because this is not only happening in Ecuador, it's a global problem that is happening throughout the region, throughout Asia, in the United States, even in Australia. In fact, our first ambassador for the campaign is Pacha Light, an Ecuadorian professional surfer living in Australia, and she's going to help spread the word of this campaign in various countries and networks around the world. So we're really looking forward to seeing how we can get this out to more and more people. It's definitely an ambitious campaign, but we truly believe that by reducing the demand of shark meat and shark fins globally, it will benefit places such as the Galapagos, which is continuously under threat from distant water fishing. And finally, the last topic that I would like to discuss pertains to a pilot project that we are trying to launch to help reduce bycatch, which is the incidental capture of non-target species such as sea turtles, dolphins, sharks, etc. In the context of sea turtles, there was a recent study that looked at bycatch of sea turtles in Ecuador, Chile, and I believe Peru. And for Ecuador, it was concluded that roughly 40,500 sea turtles were being caught as bycatch per year. And out of that number, approximately 13,000 would die. And for species such as the leatherback turtle, there's really no time to waste in coming up with solutions to this problem. Populations of this species in the Southeast Pacific have declined by over 98% since the 1980s. And it is estimated that there are only 600 or so left in this region. In fact, if you look at all 5 species of sea turtle, all of them are either critically endangered, or vulnerable. But there is hope, and if we act quickly, there are certain technologies that can potentially save some of these species from extinction. That is why our ministry has begun working with Safety Net Technologies, a UK company, the Leatherback Project, and also Fish Tech Marine to try and design a pilot project to test various technologies here in Ecuador. So for example, LED lights have been proven as an effective tool for reducing bycatch across a range of species and other fisheries. And these devices are easy to fit to existing gears and often require minimal maintenance during operation. And if you look at the studies, applying lights has been shown in many cases to effectively reduce bycatch without impacting target catch rates. For example, a study conducted in Ghana, LED lights were able to reduce up to 80% of sea turtle bycatch and had zero impact on the fish that were being targeted. So based on results such as this and the problem of sea turtle bycatch in this region, it is easy to see why this project is so important. It will also provide an opportunity to test these LED lights on various shark species, and we plan to incorporate another technology known as the shark guard, which has also been very successful in keeping sharks away without impacting target catch such as tuna and other less threatened species. So we hope to move forward with this pilot project as soon as we secure the necessary funding. And if there are any NGOs or government agencies that would like to get involved and support this work, please do not hesitate to let us know. And before I conclude, I would just like to say make one final important announcement on behalf of Minister Montanera and our Vice Minister of Fisheries, Andres Arens. We have recently decided that our ministry will submit several proposals to the South Pacific RFMO, which if passed, will be a major win for sustainable fisheries in the region. To give you all a quick idea, for this specific RFMO, we will be proposing a prohibition on transshipments. We'll be proposing a prohibition on certain open water suppliers, for example, suppliers of gasoline. We'll propose that every vessel be equipped with an onboard observer, or at least a virtual observer. And last but not least, inspections on the high seas for specific circumstances. Sustainable fisheries. So at this time, I can't really get a quick idea because these proposals are still being worked on, but we feel that it's important to sneak peeks of some of our plans. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. LeBlanc. Very briefly, and again, thanking you and especially the authorities and all of you to remain with us. I just want to go very briefly to the request for the floor and questions. I have a first request for the floor by the Deputy Permanent Representative of the European Union to the UN in New York, Ambassador Silvio Gonzato, who has requested the floor. Please, it's an honor to have you here. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Apologies, the ambassador had to quickly leave because of the delay in the meeting. Could I let you know by the chat when he comes back, and then we could take him a little bit later? Apologies for that.
No worries. Thank you very much, and we understand. So I will read some of the questions that we have been receiving, both in the chat and through the YouTube channel connection. So the first one will be from the permanent mission from Argentina. Thank you very much for that. Is how unreported and unrelated fishing, IUU fishing, is affecting the marine reserve of Galapagos, and how these activities can be mitigated. From a permanent mission of Colombia, how Ecuador is engaging to combat plastic pollution in the island. From Brazil, what potential does Ecuador see in the negotiation for a BBNJ agreement to ensure the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity in the high seas? From Erika Carrera, to either Mr. Norman or Mr. Sevilla, what would be a long-term solution to avoid IUU fishing from the international waters in the light of the precautionary principle established in the 1992 Rio Declaration? We have another question from someone else also referring to precautionary principle. From Activismo Ambiental, how will solutions about Galapagos environmental issues be taken, and how that will be dealt with the industry? Other questions refer to specific cases about shark caught, and also the activities in the high seas with impact in the recent events in the Galapagos Island marine biodiversity. So perhaps with these questions that we have managed to gather. For the moment, I will like to go in the reverse order, but very briefly, and being mindful of the time, to give 1 minute to each in the reverse order to those who want to respond to those questions. So please, Mr. LeBlanc, I'll get back immediately with you. You have 1 minute, please, to answer any of these questions if you wish, of course, to do so. The floor is yours. You have 1 minute.
Sorry, is there a specific question, or are you meant to answer any of the questions that are showing?
I was willing to answer any of the questions, of course, if you're.
Well, I see.
So,
I see one.
but I also received the information that Ambassador from the EU is back. So, Ambassador Gonzato, perhaps I give you the floor first, and then we'll get back to the panel for any questions, for any answers, if of course you want to do so. So, please, Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, and I'm sorry I was absent for a little while. So let me thank you first for organizing this event, and also let me say how much I appreciated the interventions by the different panelists and for their strong commitment to marine biodiversity. I think this discussion today is extremely timely because it's 1 day before the Biodiversity Summit, and it follows on the enormous success that the Leaders' Pledge for Nature had yesterday, with more than 70 heads of state and government pledging, including ourselves, I'm very proud to say. We feel that marine protected areas and other effective conservation measures are key tools to ensure and protect marine biodiversity. Already a decade ago, we had agreed to protect 10% of the marine environment through MPAs by 2020. And we already see that this target has only been partially agreed, as it's pointed out in the 5th Global Biodiversity Outlook launched recently. And clearly the targets are insufficient if we want to achieve on our ambitious goal. So we need to be more ambitious, and we recently published our biodiversity strategy for 2030, which is part of our European Green Deal, where we really want to put Europe's biodiversity on a path to recovery by 2030, with clear benefits for people, climate, and the planet. And we are also looking at the goal of protecting 30% of the ocean by 2030. So 30 is really clearly an objective for us. But it's not just a question of size. It's a question also of having critical coverage, having MPAs which are representative and protect unique ecosystems. And not only that, but they also link each other. They are properly connected with each other, so that the system of marine protected areas works out effectively. And we also need to ensure more sustainable use of our oceans. And so fisheries management measures must be established in all marine protected areas. And we have to have clearly defined conservation objectives to do this on the basis of the best available scientific advice. So we must ensure that the transition to more selective and less damaging fishing techniques is achieved. Let me then say one final thing, and sorry, it's not a question, it's more, I try to contribute to your discussion with our viewpoint. One objective that we have is also to conclude the negotiations for an ambitious BBNJ as soon as possible. I think it's super important, as some have pointed out already, to improve ocean governance, and we need this agreement to form the legal framework for the establishment of area-based management tools, including MPAs, in areas that go beyond national jurisdiction. So thank you again for this important initiative. Thank you to Ecuador, and thank you to all the panelists.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for joining us, and thank you for your comment as well. Very, very valid to this conversation. I'll repeat perhaps that these questions, some of them have been specifically addressed, some of them have been put in very general terms regarding IUU fishing, plastic pollution, the negotiations on BBNJ. So this is just perhaps for you to take them into account when you do your closing remarks. So you're not, of course, if the question does not address your area of expertise or competence, please feel free to comment at your will. So each of the panelists will have a very brief 1 minute, very strict for any closing comments or responses to the questions that have been raised. So I will go in the reverse order with the final closing remarks by Minister Gallegos at the end. Please, Mr. LeBlanc, you have 1 more minute if you want to make use of that time for any closing comment or remark, please.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I saw one question here where someone is asking about plastic pollution and how it's affecting the Galapagos Islands. They're asking how Ecuador is engaging to combat plastic pollution on the islands. I think Minister Rai can give a good answer on that one, but I did want to mention that there is a initiative by Inti Gronenberg through the company Iction to implement technology in the river systems here in Ecuador, which will pick up, I believe, what has the capacity to pick up 70 tons of plastic per day from some of the most polluted river systems along the Pacific. So we hope to see that project going forward, because that is one of the major sources for pollution that ends up in the Galapagos from the river systems along the coast of Ecuador, Peru, Colombia. So that's one initiative that our government is definitely supporting and that we hope to see it go forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blanc. Now, Ms. Cárdenas, please, you have 1 minute for any closing comments or responses. If you wish to do so, please, you have 1 minute. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I think I will do a final comment. I think we are in a very special moment, right, in history. I think we have a really good opportunity to think about the legacy that we will leave to the future generations, and based on important science research based decision making, I think we can have a very strong impact in working together to try to make a very good support for more additional conservation that we have seen the data, we have seen all the resource is needed, but also to try to work together to think about this as an important thing for our future, for ourselves, right? So here is a very important idea to put together all these goals for sustainable development, to think about food security for the future, for having healthy planet, healthy species, also for the future generations to enjoy them, right? Not only to get provisional service, but also those recreational, cultural services. And it could be our legacy. So we will see, we should try to have a important action now and make that difference for the future.
Thank you very much. It's now the turn for you, Ms. Blatt, you have 1 minute for any final remarks or responses. Please, the floor is yours.
It's better to unmute before you start speaking. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me on the panel. I very much echo Mrs. Cárdenas, but I guess what I would like to put in here as well is that if we do have a historic opportunity, it is really an important time to reflect. There are also many processes that are going on at the moment, which we must make sure come to a fruition as quickly as possibly. And of course, I'm talking in particular of the BBNJ treaty. We need to insert more ambition into the treaty. We need all sectors to come together to understand how important this treaty is for them and their future. Also, the fishing sector needs to be more integrated into the discussions, and fishing needs to be a central part of the sort of aiming of this treaty. As I said in my intervention, fishing is the single largest in situ activity with the single largest impact on ocean health, and so it's really important to include fishing in the treaty. And I think implementation of existing international law in combination with this new treaty, could really make a game changing for a big part of the planet. 45% of the planet is oceans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Earle, you have 1 minute for any final remarks or responses. Please, the floor is yours. You have one minute, please.
I think you're on mute, Sylvia.
Ms. Earle, perhaps you're still with us? Okay. Floor is yours.
In order to get from where we are to a better place, recovery, and then one hopes a sustainable place for ourselves within the natural systems that keep us alive, we simply must change our attitude about the diversity of life in the ocean. Fish are wildlife. Lobsters, sea cucumbers, these are wild creatures. We treat them as commodities. We used to do this with whales. It took us a long time to think of whales as something other than measured by the ton and sold just as pounds of meat and barrels of oil. We still have this attitude about other forms of ocean life. But the greatest diversity of life is in the ocean. The major divisions of life on Earth are out there in the ocean. Only about half occur on the land or in freshwater. We need to really face up to the reality. We have old habits, old perceptions, born of years of not knowing the reality that is now before us. Our superpower, our ability to go from where we are to a better place is knowledge. Now we know what we could not know until right about now. The value of fish alive. We worry, and we should, about illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. But I worry most about legal fishing because it's way out of control, beyond what the ocean can continue to yield. Some fishing to supply true needs for people, that's one thing. But taking on the large scale that we're now trying to impose on the systems that are critical to our survival, it's causing problems for the climate, it's causing problems for the diversity of life. We need to change the way we think about life in the sea and to realize that it's not all just in the sunlit upper areas, but the deep sea. Think about the Galapagos, where the origin of so many different kinds of life were discovered in the 1970s. A new kingdom of life in the waters, in the deep waters around the Galapagos. We need to take this into account while we're thinking about expanding protection, real protection. If we don't do it now, we are going to suffer losses that are irreplaceable. I really applaud Ecuador as a country, the leadership, and the people who are really moving to expand real and full protection for things that are irreplaceable, because it's easy to kill them, easy to lose them. It's really hard to try to restore what's already lost.
Thank you very much, Ms. Earle. Now, for you, Mr. Roque Sevilla, you have 1 minute for any final remarks or answers to the questions. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I would like to make a comment to Mr. Ambassador Cansato of the European Union on the importance of the very special marine areas that should be the first focus that the world should have. And of course, the Galapagos is probably one of them, because it has an incredible biodiversity that the specialists have already talked about. The encounter of 5 huge marine currents that just hit in exactly the same place where the archipelago is. And finally, the structure of the microvia
that has been discovered between Galapagos and Cocos, and that also makes part of the whole system, islands in Panama and in Colombia. So here we have 4 countries that could join in a protection: Ecuador, Colombia, Panama, and Costa Rica. So probably it's the very first marine area where we should begin to work as an example for the whole world.
Thank you very much. Now for you, Minister Wright, you have 1 minute for any closing remarks or answers. Please, you have the floor. Minister Wright, are you with us still? Okay. If that is not the case, I would like to give the floor finally to Ambassador Luis Gallegos, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ecuador, for his closing remarks. Please, Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Walter. First of all, I would like to thank all of you for being present in this parallel event of the utmost importance for this subject matter. The growing challenges that we have and have been mentioned today, and the different initiatives that respond to them, demonstrate the international cooperation is crucial to strengthen the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity as part of a common responsibility. While taking into account the special conditions resulting from the dependence on distribution, location of biological diversity within developing countries. I have to thank Sylvia for recognizing the effort the Ecuadorian people have done in Galapagos and in the preservation of these resources. I always mention that I am very honored because as a young diplomat, I was member of the delegation that declared, that got the UNESCO to declare Galapagos as a natural heritage of humanity. I think we are in a crossroads of the world because of COVID and because it has made a capacity of reflection for all of us. Ecuador has a very unique situation, and it is in this context that we are negotiating with a series of issues, both regionally and internationally. But we are also in the midst of creating a consensus, a national consensus on these issues, which will mark our future and the future of our generations. Ecuador's surface around the Galapagos Islands and the continent are around 1,033,000 square kilometers. By extending the platforms, both of the Carnegie Rift and the Cocos and the Colón mountain ranges, we will be at 1,300,000. We need to protect that area. We need also to see the perception in which we must have a joint effort by all. The word here for me, the key word is equilibrium. We must have an equilibrium in which we preserve and conserve these sustainable resources, and at the same time we permit the financial and economic implications of the fishing industry to be respectful of these and continue. It is the only way we can guarantee the future of our nation and of humanity. I would like to thank the experts for providing me and all the audience with a very rich material of experience, good practices, lessons learned, and of course, initiatives that my government and the governments of the region and the world must learn. We will be doing, as Jeff just said a few minutes ago, we will be doing our work in the multilateral aspects, not only in BVLJ, but also in creating the elements that would permit us to control the fishing in the high seas next to the economic zone of the Galapagos Islands in the future. Thank you very much again, and I wish you the best. Please keep safe. I think Norman is with us again, so I'll leave him for his minute of reflection. And I would like to thank you in the name of the government of Ecuador and the permanent mission in New York, and all the members of this group that have been with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Gallegos. Just to double check finally, since you mentioned Minister Wright, you want to take the floor for any closing remark? We have 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much. Well, this is the only way that we can go forward and to achieve these greater challenges that we have as humanity, as a humankind, is working together. And the only way to do that is with dialogue, with be honest with our data, with information, and be aware of what are the big challenges that the humankind is living right now on the planet, for sure. So working in the conservation of the oceans and working in better way of management all the life of this incredible and huge blue territory, I think so that is should be a commitment for all of us, for the people that work in the ocean and use the resources for their economic activities, the little ones and the big ones, and also that ones that we also love the oceans for many reasons, for their food, because they're beautiful, or because they have life inside of it. So I think so that is the moment of working together, because if not, maybe it will be too late in the next future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Wright, and thank you once again to all of you. We have gone beyond half an hour, beyond the time allocated, but this really is a demonstration of the passion that all of you have on this issue, and the commitment that the government of Ecuador and other governments and organizations have also with the protection, conservation, and sustainable use of the marine biodiversity and the Galapagos Island, also natural resources. So thank you, all of you, once again, and all of the general public also that has followed us through YouTube. Please stay safe and have a wonderful afternoon or evening, depending on time zone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Thank you.